Hi there, my name's Elliot. I'm the founder of Contrast, an e-commerce marketing agency. Today we're going to dig into SEO for discontinued or out of stock products and how you want to go about handling them. Make sure to stick around to the end as we've got a downloadable workflow to walk you through these steps. So what we'll be looking at today is how out-of-stock products can affect your SEO. Then we'll dig into the two different types of this, which is like temporarily out-of-stock products and also then permanently like discontinued product pages, the solutions to resolve these, and then again how this affects you from an SEO standpoint. So again, if you're an e-commerce store owner and you've got hundreds, thousands, if not tens of thousands product pages, it's natural as the life cycle of these products that some points that the stock will be out and you're waiting for inventory to come in, so that there'll be out of stock product pages. And the same goes with that from this, you need to obviously let customers know that this is the case, as well as search engines. So how's the best way to go about this? So now we'll delve into how like out of stock or deprecated products can affect you from an SEO perspective. It normally breaks down into four areas, which is crawl budget, technical SEO, SEO value, and then the user experience. So we'll delve into these four areas so you can get a little bit better understanding of how each of these is affected. Let's talk about crawl budget to begin with. This is only something that if you're a larger site with tens of thousands of pages, you're going to probably run into. That ultimately, we'll dig into this a little bit more in a few examples, but if you've got out of stock products and you're still crawling those pages, that's ultimately what leads into this being the issue. From a technical SEO error perspective, this is when we're talking more so around if we're redirecting pages, have we got any errors like 404s or redirect chains being caused by infinite big long loops. From an SEO value perspective, if customers can't come onto the site and ultimately can't purchase these products, you could obviously argue from a brand awareness perspective, this is still, it's okay to have the page there, but what's the real benefit? Obviously, if it's going to come back in stock, that's one thing. But again, if the page is deprecated and no longer going to come into stock, what's the real argument for keeping that page? There needs to be a reason for that, and we'll delve into a couple of those a little bit later on. And from a user experience point of view, this is going to cause a very high bounce rate because they'll come onto the page and they can't ultimately perform the action that they want to, which is ultimately to try and buy the product. Unfortunately, like all SEO cases, there is a little bit of, it depends on your individual circumstance and your store, the size, the amount of SKUs and things to that nature. But we'll do it with a little bit of a rule of thumb as a generic thing, so the information still is of value. The questions that we need to ask here for the product being out of stock is, number one, is it just temporarily out of stock, or is it going to be completely deprecated that it's never going to come back in stock? Number two, is the page getting organic traffic? You can check this in your Google Analytics. Number three, is the page got backlinks to and referring domains? Again, that can be checked in Ahrefs. What internal resources or access to development resources do you have within your organization for being able to make certain changes moving forwards? For marketers a little bit more tech savvy, they might be able to implement some of the smaller issues. There are some more complex ones that if you're running like custom CMS, that you might need to work with somebody to help fix them. Let's talk about the actual example now for an out of stock product. What do we need to do? First of all, it goes without saying that we don't want to delete the page. We want to keep it and that we need to make sure that it has the status code of 200, which is that the page is indexable and crawlable. Ultimately, when that stock comes back in, people will be able to purchase it. So we need to make sure that this product page is still accessible in the sitemap. And again, we need to make sure that the actual product page is marked as out of stock, and with it being marked out of stock, that your e-commerce platform makes it so it removes the cart to be able to click add to cart, so it doesn't detract away from the user experience and cause them issues. And as well as a small other user experience point that you can do is just adding the functionality for them to be able to sign up to receive notification when the product comes back into stock. Obviously, as we've kind of alluded to in the constraints previously, that having out of stock product page does cause high bounce rates, as in people coming to the page, not sticking around and then going back to the search results. There are ways that we can look to manipulate or look to resolve this. From the search click-through in the beginning, sometimes you see it in the search results that there is schema markup to say that this product's in stock, the price and reviews. If we can set schema of out of stock to automatically update to say out of stock in the SERPs, that'll reduce the click-through rate to again reduce the ultimate bounce rates. On these individual product pages, when a product is out of stock, suggesting similar items that whether that's related or close related, that they can ultimately click through and buy instead. That's a great example of functionality to add from a user experience perspective. And then to add to this is something that you'll probably want to test a little bit more internally for your store, is that you might want to consider if the product is out of stock, removing the ability to showing that product there and ultimately showing closer alternatives that they're coming up to find with instead. As we can see here for this example for John Lewis, this is a product that is temporarily out of stock, and they've actually gone a step further and got a bigger notification just above the breadcrumbs to say that this product is out of stock, incentivizing and suggesting that the user sign up to the out of stock email notification, which we can see highlighted here, as well as suggesting similar products that they can then click through and to continue the buyer journey and hopefully perform a sale on the site. That's obviously talking about what we do for products that are out of stock and are going to come back in, but what do we do about products that are deprecated and discontinued and aren't going to come back into stock ever? This is where we leverage the status code of 410 rather than just it being a normal index accessible page of a 200, or for argument's sake, deleting the page and it being a 404. So what we need to do is we need to mark that this page is ultimately no longer available. When the search engines crawl it and they crawl it as a 410, it then signals to them that this is a discontinued product that can't be purchased anymore. Using a 410 status code over a 400 signifies that the page has gone rather than it's not been found if it was a 404. So that the knock-on effects to that is that if we had marked it as a 404 and we were looking in like Google Search Console, we just have a massive influx of broken pages that wouldn't be obviously great, and we'd probably want to implement another further solution to resolve that. So going down the 410 might be a good option for yourself. Though having said that, using a 410 in some circumstances isn't the best option. So for argument's sake, you run a massive store and they are marked as a 410, they are still being crawled. So this ultimately, if you're a massive store, would start to eat into your crawl budget, but that's only something to start to worry about at that size, and then you can obviously look to implement alternative solutions to resolve the knock-on effect from implementing that. Also, if these discontinued pages have a lot of organic traffic or links to them, marking them as a 410 might not be the best option. You might want to consider redirecting them instead. So let's dig into the workflow now for a permanently discontinued product page. So first of all, we need to first establish what's the size of the site. Like, are we a small one or are we a large one? If we're a small one and we can pretty much keep the page there and not touch it, we could keep the page and 410 it. We could do that. That's probably a bit more best practice. But as a smaller site, we're not going to have any issues from a crawl budget perspective. Though if we're a large site, we're going to run into issues long term around this. So this is when we want to ask a secondary question here, like, does the product page get traction? Like, is it got decent amount of organic traffic coming to it? If it does, just leave the page. If it doesn't have any traction, then what we can then do from there is, as a larger site, if we had a load of 410 pages, this this just isn't going to be good. And we need to think about it as a ratio here. Like we don't want to have, like, for argument's sake, 90% of our pages 410ing and only 10% of them in stock. So like you think of it as like maximum like to 5, possibly 10% like of your overall site perspective. So if I was on a larger site, what I'd look to do is redirecting. So just using a 301 redirect. So let's obviously delve into this for John Lewis here. So obviously we know John Lewis is a large site, so they're not going to necessarily want to keep these pages as 410 or things like that. So we can see that throwing this site into Ahrefs, it has no backlinks, and it's also, from checking Ahrefs, it's not getting any organic traffic. Obviously they can confirm this internally with Google Analytics. So in this case, we'd suggest doing a 301 redirect. When doing the 301 redirect, we're not going to redirect to another product page. We're going to redirect it to the category page. This then means that, for argument's sake, what you then start to see is that product then gets discontinued, and then you redirect that one. So you start to see these redirect chains happening. So to resolve this, we just go straight to the subcategory page. Obviously, like the final note to say around this then is a case that if you are doing those redirects, one thing you might want to consider if you've got the development resources in-house is just to display a message on page to say that that product is out of stock and you are being redirected, so the user understands this and why it's happening, just from a small user experience perspective. So obviously when we just want to leave the product page alone, this is a case of when the page has got some traction, as already said. So we're not going to do a redirect, we're not going to implement a 410, it's just going to leave it as is. Obviously, we do want to signify to the user, if they do land on this page, that it is out of stock. Again, do make sure you've got the click-throughs to related products. Obviously, long term, if the page starts to lose traffic, at that point, that's when we can consider alternative options. Like if it was a smaller site, doing a 410, or if it's a larger site, that would when we'd be wanting to do a redirect, as well as look at removing from internal links and sitemap. So obviously this is quite a confusing topic. It depends on your individual circumstance, the size of your site, to what recommendations are best practice and what you should consider doing for yourself. So to hopefully make your life a little bit easier, we've got this downloadable workflow that you can follow along to your use case to know what to do at which different stage. So you can get that by going to the link below. Obviously, if you are still struggling or you want some external help with this, because as we can say, it's going to get quite confusing quite quickly, obviously get in touch. Our contact information is below, and we do this on a regular basis for our e-commerce clients, so we'd be more than happy to help you.